2013 more EF5. A tornado destroyed once more. Dude, I will never. Dude, I will never. Okay, take my word. I will never move to Moore, Oklahoma. It's been hit by an E. It was hit by an F5. Then it was hit by an EF5. And all along with that, by the way, I was just looking for my. Looking around my city. That's what I've been doing. Didn't build anything. And if you think that's bad, it's been hit by multiple EF4s. It's been hit by multiple EF3s. It's just been bombarded. It's a really bad town to live in if you hate tornadoes. Like, tornado is to Oklahoma as crime is to Chicago or Detroit or to Cleveland. Yeah, not a really fun place to be, in my opinion. I mean, it's a good town. People look friendly. People look nice. It's just tornadoes are making it miserable to live there.
A day that lives
May 3rd,
in the state of Oklahoma.
an F5 strikes
Multiple
Moore, Oklahoma.
Towns and cities were hit by violent tornadoes that evening and into the night. But most of that pain was centered in the communities of Bridge Creek, Oklahoma City, Midwest City, Dow City, and more. For more specifically, many were horrified at what had occurred at one of the multiple epicenters during the aftermath of one of the worst tornadoes in Oklahoma history. The city of Moore would be hit over the next 10 years by various tornadoes, with an F4 tornado in 2003 and an EF4 in 2010. However, those two tornadoes produced their worst damage outside of the Moore city limits. By mid-May 2013, many clearly remembered the destruction and heartache that happened a holiday in a week's time. But the residents across Moore on May 20th, 2013, would witness history repeat itself again, and their worst fears came to light. It was May 3rd, 1999, all over again.
This is literally just a primary example of history repeats itself.
2013,
a tornado, the equal strength of a tornado that hit literally like 14 years ago, rebirthed itself and struck Moore, Oklahoma once again, doing even more catastrophic damage. I think the new one was the worst one, wasn't it?
Tornado outbreak broke out across the Central Plains, with the majority of the activity being observed across Kansas and Oklahoma. A total of 3 violent tornadoes were observed, with an EF4 in Kansas on the 18th, an EF4 in Oklahoma on the 19th, but it was the last violent tornado from that outbreak that grabbed the nation's attention. On the afternoon of May 20th, an EF5 tornado tore through the city of Moore, Oklahoma, just a few weeks after the 14-year anniversary of the May 3rd, 1999 F5 tornado, which also tore through portions of Moore. The city of Moore now left in shambles, as they were now once again directly hit by a violent tornado. And unlike the other two near misses, this tornado tore through the center of the city.
It even looped around on this one spot and wiped it off face third.
Moore was face to face with their second F or EF5 tornado. So today, I'll be taking a deep dive into the May 18th through the 21st, 2013 tornado outbreak.
Oh.
With a primary focus on the Moore EF5.
Dude, in that same month, tornadoes threatened to destroy Moore again. As May 31st, 2013, El Reno, Oklahoma. That day was a day of which the widest tornado ever recorded struck and absolutely didn't obliterate anything. Actually, it didn't really obliterate anything. Luckily, this tornado was out in the open, ranking it in EF3. It was 2.6 miles wide, the width to swallow entire towns. Entire towns! Like Eureka, Illinois, the town I used to go to school at. I'm saying like this town would have been swallowed whole with only the north part sticking out of the tornado. That's how stupid this storm was. It was big. Big tornado. Yeah, Moore, Oklahoma. 2013 was a bad year for Oklahoma.
The state of tornadoes so far before the outbreak, the synopsis, the outbreak itself, the aftermath, and the significance.
May 2013 was a strong year.
Welcome to Nature's Fury.
Strong month for tornadoes.
2013 was a weird year for tornadoes. Most of the tornado season that year was relatively quiet until May, and most of the activity was contained within the last half of that month. A primary reason for the relatively quiet tornado season until May was that in March and April, unusual cold air persisted across much of the United States. Not to mention that the tornado season occurred during the La Nina to El Nino transition period. But the quiet period quickly changed come May 15th. A tornado outbreak occurred from the 15th through the 17th in the Southern Plains, including an EF4 tornado that struck Granbury, Texas. But of course, another outbreak was beginning to set up across Oklahoma and Kansas. But real quick, the majority of people who like these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you enjoy what I create, consider subscribing. It helps the channel and tells me I'm doing something right. Anyways, back to the May 18th through the 21st, 2013 tornado outbreak.
Hyundai Santa Cruz versus Ford Maverick. Look what Santa Cruz has. And what
5,000 tons, my passage.
Beginning on May 16th and through the 26th, an extremely slow upper-level trough moved across the central United States. This slow-moving trough had an associated complex frontal system connected by numerous low-pressure systems. From the 16th through the 22nd, these frontal boundaries were stalled, stagnated across the plain states. The primary trough slowly moved eastward from the Rocky Mountains into the Great Plains on May 18th, with the surface low pressure with a dry line forming on the Colorado-Oklahoma border. The expectation was that the cap would break near the dry line, and the majority of the storms would form along the dry line. The primary threats for that day were for strong winds and large hail, and a few tornadoes. However, most of the activity occurred from the 19th through the 20th. On the 19th, a very moist and unstable air mass was located over Texas and Oklahoma and rapidly moving northward into eastern Kansas and western Missouri by mid-afternoon. A strong capping inversion was in place over the central plains.
Capping is when I think a heat cap forms. If the cap remains, then nothing bad happens. If the cap is broken, and this allows severe storms to feed off of energy and develop, making them exponentially stronger.
Upper-level low was located in the northern plains. A surface low was observed in Oklahoma with an associated dry line. But let's go a bit more in depth with the 20th. On the 20th, the upper-level trough continued to slowly move eastward just like the days prior. The leading upper-level low was located in the northern plains. A southern stream shortwave trough and a moderately strong polar jet ejected to the east-northeast from the southern Rockies towards the southern plains and the Ozarks. A surface low with an associated dry line was present in western Oklahoma, with a strong frontal boundary nearby. Storms were expected to initiate by peak heating and was expected to continue into the overnight hours, specifically with the biggest threat for tornadoes being located in Oklahoma with the sharpening dry line and the heat-aided surface low. Winds at the 500 millibar level were strong, with many areas across Oklahoma seeing winds around 50 to 70 knots. Cape values in Oklahoma ranged from 2,000 joules per kilogram to over 4,000 joules per kilogram, mainly over the Oklahoma City metro area.
That'll do it.
Dew points were extremely high, with those being in the 60s and 70s across Oklahoma, and temperatures in Oklahoma were in the 80s. Mid-level lapse rates ranged from 7 to 8 degrees Celsius per kilometer throughout the day in Oklahoma. Low-level lapse rates were from 7 to over 8 degrees Celsius per kilometer in Oklahoma, with the higher lapse rates being observed to the west of Oklahoma City. There were a few issues regarding the environment, though, especially whenever it came to tornadoes. Firstly was storm mode. Mesoscale models showed that the storms that did form that day would upscale into a line by the time the storms were in eastern Oklahoma. The biggest chance for discrete supercells was in southern Oklahoma and northern Texas, while in central and northern Oklahoma, storms were likely to begin discrete but quickly organize into broken lines as storms continued to form. Low-level shear was the biggest issue. Winds at the 850 millibar level were less than adequate. By the time the Moore tornado formed, directly over the OKC metro area. Winds at the 850 millibar level
Sorry.
were around 35 to 40 knots. But it was a 700 millibar speed max over the Oklahoma City metro area right as the Moore supercell neared the area that allowed for the Moore tornado to form. The 700 millibar speed max, which was around 50 knots and peaked at around 70 to 80 knots, was not forecasted during the event due to how hard it is to forecast the 700 millibar wind spiking, especially over such a small area. Outside of the Moore tornado, low-level shear was weak, with the stronger low-level winds ending up being located further to the east. Storm relative helicity was also an issue. While earlier on in the day there was an storm relative helicity ranged from 50 to 100 meters squared per second squared, which is relatively low, except for when the Moore tornado happened. Storm relative helicity peaked at over 200 meters squared per second squared over the Oklahoma City metro area, yet again, due to the 700 millibar winds sharply increasing. There was a suitable environment for severe storms with large hail and strong winds. The tornado threat was dependent on the supercell structure, if low-level shear was available, and if the structure was next to a frontal boundary, either the front
Man, it's getting hot.
Oklahoma or a
Dude, it's getting hot outside. If a cold front comes through and starts pushing, it could destabilize the atmosphere and theoretically cause a severe storm event. I don't know if I'm right, but I feel like I might be onto something. This heat, if it collides, if it gets lifted, it could form vorticity events. I don't know.
Outflow boundary from the day before. For the 18th, the Storm Prediction Center issued a moderate risk for severe weather with a slim area for a 10% SIG tour being over Kansas and Oklahoma, with the primary reason for the moderate being a 45 SIG hail that was located from Nebraska through
Ooh, yeah, that's when you
On
don't
the
go.
19th, a moderate risk was issued yet again with a 15 SIG tour risk being issued for Oklahoma.
In my opinion, if it gets above 15%, that's when I'm like, nope, I'm not going. Like, nah, yeah, fam, you can take it, I'm not.
Missouri, with a 45% wind risk for those areas alongside a 45% SIG hail risk. On the 20th, another moderate risk was issued with a 10% SIG tour risk being issued for Oklahoma, with the main threat being a 45% wind risk across Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri, and a 45% SIG hail risk for portions of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. The 20th was looking to be a very significant day for severe weather, but the last thing anyone was expecting, given the expectations for fast upscaling with the storms in central Oklahoma, the low amounts of low-level shear, and the relatively low storm relative helicity, was a violent tornado tearing through the 7th most populated city in Oklahoma. But before going into the 20th, let's go over the 18th through the 19th real quick. On May 18th, the day was mostly notable for numerous hail and wind reports. However, there was one violent tornado that day. Around 5:30 p.m., a supercell thunderstorm developed to the northeast of Dodge City, and then spawned a large EF4 tornado near Roselle, Kansas, destroying a home and 5 farms which were damaged. The tornado made a sharp northward turn within 1 mile near Roselle, with the NWS in Dodge City stating that Roselle likely would have been destroyed by the tornado. On the 19th, multiple strong to violent tornadoes touched down in Oklahoma and Kansas, with a suitable synoptic environment. Strong wind shear, cape over 2,000 joules per kilogram, and peak daytime heating breaking the cap that was in place over the states by mid-afternoon. A terrifying supercell in Kansas aimed straight for Wichita, leading to the NWS issuing a tornado emergency for the city.
Uh-oh.
The tornado lifted before reaching downtown proper and was rated EF2. During the late afternoon, several storms developed into robust supercells within the state of Oklahoma, with several tornadoes touching down. At 4:41 p.m., a large EF3 tornado touched down 3 miles to the northwest of Luther, Oklahoma, and tracked for roughly 20 miles. An EF4 tornado touched down around 6 p.m. over Cleveland County, resulting in severe damage in multiple areas, specifically near Shawnee, Oklahoma. 2 were killed by the Shawnee EF4. As the day progressed on the 19th, The storms in Oklahoma dissipated, and the threat shifted to a wind and hail threat in Kansas and the upper Midwest, with numerous winter storms in Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin, just to name a few. Meteorologists in Oklahoma warned citizens that the threat of severe weather was far from over. Locals, such as Roger Graham, a former storm chaser who lived in Moore at the time, told me.
Yeah, so talk about the 19th, the day
Okay,
before.
I have an idea for this.
Octagonal prisms, the square root of 2, quantifier variance. Okay, now that only the cool people are left.
Locals,
What?
such as Roger Graham, a former storm chaser who lived in Moore at the time, told me.
Yeah.
Okay, I have an idea for this. Gun range and restaurant mixed into one. Oh my god, yeah. I know it sounds like a weird idea, but still. Have a gun range and a restaurant.
So, talk about the 19th, the day before. So, both the 19th and the 20th, I keep, since I was a former meteorology major and still kept up with the storms and followed them very closely, the 19th and the 20th were well forecasted many days in advance by the Storms Prediction Center, and in Oklahoma, then meteorology and weather is kind of a big deal, even just as a layperson. So any person just walking down the street had a pretty good idea that there was a severe weather event for that day. And also because the 19th, Mother Nature showed her hand as far as what was capable on the 20th. It's the same storm system, maybe the bullseye moved a little bit further south and west, right? So the 20th, what I remember vividly about the forecast was well forecasted event. That morning I went running like I normally do, and it was just sticky, humid, overcast, really just
Sticky, humid, hot, not a good sign.
It felt like I was running
Especially when it comes to severe weather.
It felt like reminiscent for folks who remember May 8th, 2003. There's a very similar, kind of the atmospheric, the lower atmosphere was just really foggy, hazy, and you can tell we're just sitting on a powder keg. You didn't have to be a meteorologist to know that. But that was what I recall from the forecast. It was well forecasted. Everyone was talking about it. It seemed like most people were aware that day had the potential to be a high-end event.
Even with that threat in mind, nobody could have expected what happened on the 20th. As the sun rose across Oklahoma, it was unusually warm and muggy on the 20th. Thanks in part to temperatures in the 80s and dew points in the 70s.
That's not a good
It
sign.
felt like a day in summer, not mid-May. It was like a powder keg. Any storm that could fire off in an environment like this would become severe. Although the question of multiple strong to violent tornadoes was not as certain. The main issue, low-level shear. At 1:10 p.m., the Storm Prediction Center issued a tornado watch for northwestern Arkansas, portions of North Texas, and the majority of central and eastern Oklahoma. The tornado probabilities were lower than one might think. A 40% chance of 2 or more tornadoes with a 20% chance of an EF2 plus tornado. The main threat was expected to be severe wind events with an 80% chance for 10 or more severe wind events, and hail with a 90% chance of 10 or more severe hail events. The wording of the watch mentioned that 1 or 2 strong tornadoes were possible that afternoon. The expectation in the watch noted that the tornado threat was likely to increase by early evening as the southerly low-level jet strengthened during that time. Rapid storm development was expected near the I-35 corridor and near the prefrontal dry line in Oklahoma. After the tornado watch was issued, 3 of the 5 TV news outlets in Oklahoma City suspended normal programming through wall-to-wall coverage of the event. With the other two suspending programming, the two severe thunderstorm warnings were issued south of the OKC metro area. Less than half an hour after the tornado watch was issued, thunderstorms began to fire in south central and central Oklahoma. By 2:05 p.m., two thunderstorms in southern Oklahoma were given severe thunderstorm warnings. Given that the storms were expected to peak in intensity by mid-afternoon, parents in the Oklahoma City metro area began to worry. Elementary schools began dismissing students around 2:30 p.m. Parents began arriving across elementary schools to pick up their children ahead of the weather. Of course,
Good.
only those who got there before the
My school weather, because one day, it was like a 10% chance of tornadoes. Let's see. I'm gonna go back to my pictures because I actually have a screenshot of my Outlook. Oh, there's the June 29th derecho that struck my state. I think this is a derecho. That's obvious curve with a very thin, low precipitation boundary, coupled by a high precipitation core. So yeah, so first of all, so here's what the here's what the outlook looked like. So this is March 29th. Okay. And here's March 30th. Here's the next day. So it got a little bit bad. Here's a chance of tornado. So here's where it gets already bad. I live near Peoria, by the way. So it was 10% sig tornado, so that wasn't that bad. Then it got to this. So here's 15% chance tornado. You can see Peoria's in that. I live near there. And then it got that here. With there's like a it was like that. I think there was like a 30% chance of tornadoes in that area. So I go up to my principal and I email my teachers. I'm like, hey, yo, there's a 30% chance that Eureka, Illinois could be hit by a tornado. I will not be arriving at school. Thankfully, they said, yeah, go ahead, stay home. What do you know? I'm sitting in my bio class, last class of the year, and I start hearing that. I'm like, oh boy, yep, that's why I didn't go to school today. I'm going to tell my college teachers, I'm going to say, if I don't show up because of a weather concern, then you need to be frightened. Until then, stay calm. Because I only pull out of like situations like that if there's a severe storm like on the horizon.
The warning came were able to pick up their kids. At that time, another thunderstorm was forming over.
My school didn't get hit by a tornado, but a tornado lifted right before it headed towards the school, I think. Like it was going right for my school too. And the feed cut out.
Conveniently for this thunderstorm in particular, low-level shear at the 700 millibar levels were located right over the OKC metro area, leading the supercell to rapidly intensify with adequate shear at the lower levels of the atmosphere. The thunderstorm also went through several cell mergers while this was occurring. The storm quickly began to develop a mesocyclone, with the 700 millibar winds ranging from 70 to 80 knots, quickly beginning to approach the cell directly. Storm relative helicity near the OKC metro area began to peak at over 200 meters squared per second squared, and the potential for a violent tornado sharply increased for that narrow corridor where the supercell was heading. Rotation at the lower levels of the supercell began to intensify. At 2:40 p.m., as the supercell continued to rapidly intensify, a tornado warning was issued for far northeastern Grady, western Cleveland, northern McLean, and southern Oklahoma counties. and at 2:56 p.m., Oklahomans would witness what could only be described as the beginning of 39 minutes of terror as a tornado touched down in northwestern McLean County. At 2:56 p.m., a tornado touched down in northwestern McLean County, touching down roughly 4.4 miles to the northwest of downtown Newcastle. A K4 news chopper in the area caught the tornado forming on film. The tornado was a narrow cone as it formed, initially producing EF1 damage before rapidly intensifying and striking a subdivision on the north side of Northwest 32nd Street, where several homes were destroyed, including two that sustained EF4 damage. As the tornado moved to the north of Newcastle, it began to rapidly grow in camera by local news stations and storm chasers. The tornado continued to destroy and damage several structures in a separate subdivision.
And it went from like being like this at minute 1 to being like wedge at like minute 5.
Norman, Oklahoma issued a tornado emergency for southern Oklahoma City and more. The tornado maintained EF3 intensity as it crossed the Canadian River into Cleveland County and continued to move towards southern Oklahoma City and more, moving in a more easterly direction, straight for downtown Moore. The tornado began to rapidly grow in width once more, and the tornado briefly intensified to EF4 strength as it destroyed numerous homes near South May Avenue. The situation was becoming dire, and it was extremely urgent for people to take action. Given the intense debris ball caught on radar, the view of the tornado on the ground and in the air, for locals in Moore and Oklahoma City, their worst fear had come to fruition. Nobody wanted to say it, but it became apparent as to what this was looking like. It was extreme deja vu for those who had been living in Moore for at least 14 years. What it felt like. It was May 3rd all over again.
Okay, folks, this is essentially, you never want to say it, but we're going to say it right now. This is May 3rd all over again as far as the intensity of this tornado, where it is heading. And something has to change fast or it's going to be very close to a May 3rd event. Never want to say that, but that's what we have right now. It is shrouded in debris. It's a low wedge shrouded in debris. It's still on the ground back up in here.
As the urgency of the situation was being viewed live across the nation through the Weather Channel, or locally through television and radio, those in the area, specifically parents, raced to their local schools to pick up their children and take them home before the tornado reached those areas. Many were caught in traffic jams on the highways in
That's
South
why you
Oklahoma
don't.
City and elsewhere. Parents who arrived at the schools were met with locked doors and nobody nearby. The schools were on lockdown until the tornado had passed, and parents were left to go home and simply pray that their children would be okay. The tornado briefly weakened and strengthened once more as it struck near Foreman Drive, flattening several homes and throwing numerous vehicles off of the roads. And then, the tornado formally entered Moore. The tornado traveled south and along southwest 149th Street at EF3 to EF4 intensity. The tornado struck the Orr family farm at the Celestial Acres horse training area, where up to 100 horses were reportedly killed,
Oh.
with some being tossed into power lines or thrown into nearby buildings.
Oh.
At the Celestial Acres area, every building was leveled by the monster tornado. Next, the tornado struck Briarwood Elementary School. The school suffered EF4 damage, but miraculously nobody died. The roof was struck by a 12,000-gallon water tank from the Orr family farm, likely compromising the building's structural integrity. The tornado intensified further, entering the densely populated area of western Moore, flattening home after home, and peaking in intensity as an EF5 for the first time, with two well-built homes being swept clean. The tornado destroyed Plaza Towers Elementary School at EF4 intensity, with teachers and students hiding in bathrooms and hallways, waiting and praying that the hell would come to an end. 7 children died in the school during the tornado.
Oh.
The tornado continued to ravage neighborhood after neighborhood, with locals in the area watching in awe and horror as live footage from the ground and in the air showcased what was going down on the ground. The tornado began to take a more northeasterly direction, undergoing what looked like to be an occlusion. But as the tornado reached near Moore Medical Center, the tornado looped and then directly moved to the southeast before moving generally to the east, seemingly failing its occlusion. The Moore Medical Center sustained EF4 damage, and a row of brick houses to the south were completely swept away, sustaining EF5 damage. An open field behind the houses was scoured to a point where only the bare soil and clumps of dirt remained. The nearby Warren Theater was spared a direct hit, but sustained considerable damage to the exterior of the building. The tornado briefly weakened as it continued eastward and crossed I-35, before intensifying to EF4 intensity once more shortly after crossing the interstate. Several neighborhoods were destroyed beyond recognition, and one brick home on Hunters Glen Court sustained EF5 damage, with only the slab foundation and anchor bolts remaining. As the tornado continued moving through eastern Moore, the Highland East Junior High's main building was spared, but the gymnasium was completely destroyed. The Moore Public Schools Administration Building was destroyed. The tornado became smaller in size, but continued to destroy numerous homes through multiple subdivisions. The tornado weakened to an EF3 before strengthening to an EF4 nearby two homes and a concrete building as it left town. Then, the tornado began to rapidly narrow and weaken, causing EF2 damage to a farm to the east of Moore. The violent updrafts in the supercell were now outside of the tornado's outer circulation. The tornado, now separated by the extreme updrafts, began to rope out and dissipated at 3:35 p.m., a third of a mile to the east of Eric D. Poe Boulevard. As the Moore tornado lifted, the threat quickly became less favorable for tornadoes due to low amounts of low-level shear, and tornadoes did touch down outside of the Moore EF5 that afternoon. However, none came close to the sheer violence that was observed from the Moore tornado. The strongest tornado outside of the Moore EF5 was an EF2 to the south of Miami, Oklahoma. The rest of the reports came from hail and wind. 219 filtered wind reports were reported, with 5 of those reports being
What? X. Yeah. Cringe. X is a cool letter. Ah. Yeah. Now this is a cool. I want a gun range and I want a restaurant, so why not we just put both? Yep, I'm making a bar. I'm gonna go straight.